I'm Jason Calabry with the Financial News, and today we're talking to a real Irishman and someone in the money business about what's going on in Ireland with the Celtic Tiger and the banks are hurting so much, the downfall. What's the story here?
Do you really want to know?
I'd love to know.
But I'll tell you, it's like what has happened all over the Western world for the last 20 and 30 years. Greed, and more fucking greed and cheap money. And in Ireland, it's a tragedy what happened to the Tiger. We have, I'd say 4 causes. We had a stupid fucking government. We had a regulator that was asleep at the wheel. We had very deceitful and conniving and corrupt developers. And of course, above all, wanking fucking bankers. Wanking bankers. We had these arseholes that for the last 20, 30 years are getting these massive bonuses, these employees and directors of banks, on the misfortune of the working class, and getting these huge bonuses and salaries. But, you know, if you and all these arseholes should be thrown in jail and the keys thrown away for the rest of their life. And you know, sir, if you went in and you're unemployed and you wanted to take a loaf of bread out of a store or a supermarket to feed your family, guess what? You'll be up in court for it. These assholes are living all over the world now on the backs of the misfortunate working people. And who's going to pay for all this? We've mortgaged the next generation or two. Who's going to pay for it? The working man. We got the labourer, the small farmer, the fisherman, the nurse, the teacher, the policeman, the fireman, the plumber, the carpenter. Fuck's sake, man, this is a joke.
So I'm sensing a wee bit of discontent?
You are indeed, sir. And by the way, let's not be too cocky in this part of the world, North America either. All these debts that people have accumulated over the last 30 years, hey, everybody gets their day in the sunshine.
And you know, speaking of the Celtic Tiger and all that you mentioned, you know that Michael Flatley is really from Chicago, but that's another story.
Fuck off!
Is he? I don't know, Michael Flatley. But yeah, don't you hate it when someone holds back and won't tell you what they really think? But listen, the key phrase that he said there is, we have mortgaged the next generations. I mean, to put that in perspective, even in the UK now, the admitted, and this is what's admitted, public debt, is a liability of £300,000 for every child that is born in the UK in 2011. That's what they're born into this world
to be slaves.
To do, effectively, to earn the money, to be a consumer, to be an abject economic wage slave, so that they can repay £300,000 at current rates over their lifetime to offset the liabilities that have been accumulated by us and previous generations. In Ireland, it's way in excess of that. I mean, in Greece, it's off the scale. I mean, that's why what we're talking about here is a level of magnitude that is just so totally unrealistic that to keep going down this paradigm is just outrageous. That's why we know that the agenda is total asset stripping of the planet.
But this is all fraud. Can it be revealed, like on the big scale?
Well, but that's what we're trying to do. I mean, that's exactly what this is all about.
And who's going to believe you? You talk to 99% of the people on the street.
But you're absolutely right. But I mean, what I would say is that 4 years ago, if you talked to 99.99999%, they wouldn't have believed you. Yeah. But the reality is that, like I said, the Occupy movements have provided an opportunity for people to go along and actually explain the detail of what's occurring. And that's what people have been doing. So the awareness is rising. And like I said, I know it's difficult in Australia at the moment because I know how difficult it was in Ireland when I was over there in 2007. So, you know, until such time as it comes along and just goes smack around the side of the head, then people go, oh my God, you know, why didn't we see this coming? Well, it's like, people have been trying to tell you, you know, the signs have all been there. And this is the challenge now, because Australia is the last Western economy on the planet that hasn't had the rug pulled from under it. So, you know, actually, the people of Australia, one might argue, are in a slightly more advantaged position than the people of Iceland and the people of Ireland, who could still be forgiven for thinking that it wouldn't happen. You know, Australia, what makes Australians think that, you know, they are so unique that it's not going to come to the last remaining country?
Lucky country.
Especially when the level of debt, the level of personal debt, is higher than it was anywhere else on the planet. And it's going to get worse. I'm going to show you this because I'm sure you've probably seen this before.
Oh my God. There will be no carbon tax under the government I lead.
So it's my opinion, and it's just my take on things. I honestly do not believe that Kevin Rudd believed there was any risk of Julia Gillard winning the ballot. So when she requested the ballot, I think Rudd basically went, what? And he just thought the easiest way to shut this down, the easiest way to make this go away, was to go through the motions, give her the ballot that she wanted, and then put it to bed. I honestly believe that he thought, well, of course he was told that he had sufficient support to win the ballot. So that when she won, I think he was totally shocked. Yeah. Totally shocked. The whole situation was manipulated to bring her into power. Now, I don't understand necessarily why that happened to be the case, because I always thought Kevin Rudd was doing a pretty damn good job of pursuing the globalist agenda. But they must think that she is even more manipulable.
There's two reasons.
Go on.
When the Israelis assassinated those people using Australian and Dutch passports,
yep.
Right, Kevin Rudd chucked out some Israeli diplomats.
Okay, that's a good point.
Number one. Second, he brought in the mining tax.
Mining tax, yeah.
Okay, that's pretty good. Two good reasons. So she was clearly had the support. I mean, there's no doubt she would never have got the job had she not had the globalist support over Rudd. And now, of course, she is absolutely on point to introduce the carbon tax, okay, which has died a death. It's died a death in the US and in Europe. There's absolutely no possibility of carbon tax raising its head again in those countries. But these guys have a 70-year agenda that they've been working towards, and all of a sudden it looks like it's shot unless they can actually salvage it in Australia. And the great irony is that one of the reasons that it's actually shot in America and Europe is thanks to an Australian PhD physicist, Dr. John P. Costello. Because John P. Costello actually published the first concise analysis of the ClimateGate emails. And I produced a DVD, unfortunately I don't have any other copies left with me here, but I produced this DVD in November of 2009, and it's called The Green Agenda and Population Reduction. And in that presentation, I'm talking about how the green agenda has been hijacked, how many of the Greens have been sort of sucked into this very pernicious green agenda, which ultimately pursues the ideals of Agenda 21 and leads to population reduction. And I made the observation, I said, we are 3 weeks away from the Copenhagen conference, and the purpose of Copenhagen is to lay the basic framework for global governance built on carbon trading. And I said, unless something absolutely dramatic happens in the next few weeks, we're going to be looking at the first stages of global governance being in place before the end of the year. Barely 4 days after I gave that presentation, the ClimateGate emails materialised. Nobody could have ever foreseen that would happen. Of course, the establishment has done everything they possibly can to suppress the importance of the ClimateGate emails. The academics have been vindicated in the UK. No, they weren't manipulating events. This guy proves, by highlighting the emails and showing the specific emails, that this whole IPCC agenda, the International Panel on Climate Change, was a total political construct, where there was sufficient awareness in the US and throughout Europe, and sufficient knowledge of the content of the ClimateGate emails for the whole agenda to be taken off the table. And these guys were now desperate to find, if you like, a last-ditch hope of getting the carbon tax in place, and then the carbon trading, and that's why they focused on Australia. They haven't given up totally in Europe, and what I'm going to show you is a short promo film that was produced by a government-sponsored body. It's called Global 1010. This is a government-sponsored body. The director of this promotional video was Richard Curtis, the guy who was behind Love Actually and a couple of other sort of major films. So we're not talking a low-dollar product here. We're talking a high-dollar product. Global 1010 was about promoting the government agenda to encourage people to reduce their carbon emissions by 10% by 2010. And then they were going to up the game to 2020, Global 2020, reduce your carbon emissions by 20% by 2020. Now this is potentially quite disturbing, but I think you're all old enough and mature enough to be able to deal with that. But what you've got to understand is that this was a government promo that was put out on normal time TV. Not even after the watershed. Normal time TV. And I want you to absorb the significance, and we'll talk about the significance of this.
Prime time 6 o'clock, you mean?
Prime time is before 9 o'clock.
Oh, okay.
Before the watershed of 9 o'clock.
Right, kids,
Okay.
just before you go, there's a brilliant idea in the air that I'd like to run by you. Now, it's called 10-10. The idea is everyone starts cutting their carbon emissions by 10%, thus keeping the planet safe for everyone, eventually. Now, this hasn't got to be a huge thing, but I would love it if you and your families would think about doing something.
What sort of thing, Liz?
Well, like getting your dad to insulate the loft, or taking your next holiday by train instead of flying, or buying energy-saving light bulbs. We're thinking of using our car less. I'm going to cycle to school. That's fantastic, Jemima. Now, no pressure at all, but it'd be great to get a sense of how many of you might do this. Just a rough percentage. That's fantastic! And those not? Philip and Tracy. That's fine, that's absolutely fine. Your own choice. Okay, class, thank you so much for today, and I will see you all tomorrow. Oh, just before you go, I just need to press this little button here. Now everybody, please remember to read chapters 5 and 6 on volcanoes and glaciation. Except Philip and Tracy, of course.
Right, just want to chip on that 10-10 thing. Had some brilliant ideas from lots of you, how the firm can cut down emissions by 10%. Just quick show of hands, everyone who wants to get involved.
Yeah, do that.
Great, that's nearly everybody. And yeah, just for the record, no pressure. Those who aren't quite convinced about it yet. Cool, it's no problem. Your choice. Okay, so those of you planning something here or at home should probably get working on it. Oh, gorgeous. Those of you who aren't, excellent. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Well, hello everyone. It's great to be back here at Spurs. So many happy memories for me. Anyway, tell me something. What is this 10-10 thing the club is doing?
Well, it means that we're trying to cut our carbon emissions by 10% this year. And Tottenham Hotspur Football Club was the first to sign up.
We've changed the floodlights on White Hart Lane, so no low energy. Lots of our fans are coming to matches on buses, trains, bikes and stuff, rather than coming by car.
I see. Whatever, I wouldn't do it. It seems like distraction from football to me.
That's just fine, David. You don't have to join in, just ignore it. No pressure. Right, lads, let's do some penalties.
10-10. Hundreds of thousands of people, schools, businesses, hospitals, movie stars, knitting circles, scout troops, presidents and governments, all tackling climate change in more than 40 countries. Care to join us? No pressure. Is that okay?
Sounded great to me. Thanks, Gillian.
Happy to help.
So, what are you thinking of doing for 10-10 yourself?
What, are you kidding me? I thought that by doing this voiceover, that was my contribution.
Right. No, absolutely. No pressure.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
This is so daring. I mean, it breaks so many...
Taboos. What we're doing here is we are sowing the seed, we're doing what I call mindscaping, that anybody who challenges the orthodoxy of carbon reduction is liable to summary execution. But let me reframe the phrase reducing carbon footprint. Reducing carbon footprint. What are we made of?
Carbon.
And what do we do?
Breathe carbon out.
And we walk. We walk.
Yeah.
So reducing carbon footprint is a euphemism for population reduction back to Agenda 21. It's all there in black and white, literally, in words of one syllable, and we are buying into it. We're absolutely participating in it. And this is spelled out in a Club of Rome document, and by the way, there's documents that predate this, because this is even a bit of a sort of plagiarism on previous documents. But in the Club of Rome document, published in 1991, they say, in searching for a new enemy to unite us, we came up with the idea that pollution, the threat of global warming, water shortages, famine and the like would fit the bill. All these dangers are caused by human intervention. The real enemy then is humanity itself. So what they're looking to do with things like that Global 1010 thing is literally turn neighbour onto neighbour. I mean, we're looking at a sort of communistic, Stasi type agenda where everyone's scared shitless about
everybody else.
Discussing anything with anybody because they might get reported and end up in gulag or worse, summarily executed. Exploding, exactly. And what's really outrageous for me is we've just seen, I don't know about what happened in Australia, but we've just seen in Europe the most horrendously graphic pictures of Gaddafi being executed, effectively. And the media lording over it, glorifying the execution process. Whatever happened to the rule of law? Whatever happened to civilization? We're literally dehumanizing ourselves, or we're being dehumanized and allowing ourselves to be dehumanized by this outrageous agenda.
That's the proof we don't have soul.
Well, that's what they're trying to do. They're absolutely trying to suppress that. And this is, by the way, let me show you, this is the ultimate objective of carbon trading. It's the global electric energy grid. Look at this. This is what they propose, where they propose to have this very high voltage electric grid literally encircling the planet. Now, in esoteric circles, there's the belief that this high voltage electricity, like the Wi-Fi and the radio, all has an impact, of course, on our ability to connect with anything that's out there. So we're locked into this left brain construct, this left brain secular empirical materialist construct, so that we are a consumer, an abject economic slave, and we never consider anything beyond that.
There is one more thing. May I tell? This is what I became aware. Our consciousness and space are one. And if they pollute the space, they directly affect it.
Exactly.
There is big broadcasting inside
exactly
space.
correct. Exactly.
This is the trickiest aspect. We don't see it.
So this is, and these guys, are doing it, like I said, on multiple levels. Look, it's where the kids are being forced to have drugs like Ritalin pushed down their throats. In the US, it's estimated that 1 million children at any time are being given these courses of Ritalin. If you want to see the effects of these types of drugs, SSRIs, antidepressants, go Google SSRI database. That's the Selective Serotonin Reuptake Inhibitor database. And you look at all the atrocities and the self-harmings and the suicides related to people who are taking these courses of actions.
What was it called?
SSRI. Just Google SSRI space database. And we've already talked about the vaccinations, and I'm not a zealot about vaccinations, but what's happening here is that it's the heavy metals that are being put into the vaccines. Coupled with which, of course, the DNA database, the global DNA database, is being accumulated through the vitamin K heel prick, at birth. It is a total agenda for total domination of the human spirit. This is exactly what they're trying to shut down.
Immune and nerve system are actually the same. Immune system is just the mobile nerve system. So
whatever
affect immune affect.
Well, the immune system is being destroyed by the vaccines, by the junk food, by the lack of access to natural health products, and so on and so forth. And you've got a massive problem coming up in Australia.
Cracking. Just give it a second. Whoa.
If you haven't seen the film Gasland, if you take nothing else away from this tonight, You know, go and Google the film Gasland and download it. You know, I was talking about this, I'm 20 years in the oil industry, and I was talking about the issues associated with the rapid development of reservoir stimulation technology. Now, unfortunately, I probably wasn't using the phraseology that resonated with people, and so I was getting nowhere. But I was trying to explain to them that the real issue here is nothing to do with peak oil. It doesn't exist. That's a fantasy. That's a fallacy. The real issue is going to come with the reservoir stimulation, i.e. the fracking. Because you know, this is a technology that we certainly don't have control over. So what we're doing is we're pumping massive amounts of toxic cocktail into the earth, into the rock strata, under massive pressure. It's opening up the rock strata, ostensibly of course to create the channels for the flow of the gas, the hydrocarbons. But because there's no control over it, it's breaking into the water supplies. So what you've got is anywhere, and unfortunately around the US, this accounts for almost all of the rural areas where people are dependent on underground aquifers for their water supply, and the aquifers are being poisoned. So they can no longer use their own water supply for either drinking, washing even, laundry, because it's poisoning the, it's contaminating the clothes they wear, and of course the soils, so they can't use the water for irrigation. So they become totally subordinate to whoever it is that provides their water.
The salt comes up through the soil and destroys the soil.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, all this stuff's coming into the soil, the subsoils, the soils, gets into the food chain. You know, once again, we're talking a massive part of the ultimate depopulation reduction agenda.
Yeah, Agenda 21 getting people into the cities as well. They can't use that land.
Exactly. So, I mean, it's all there. Yeah. And of course, it's meant to seem so outrageous and so ridiculous. They'll never do that, will they? Until such time as you find yourself forced into the cities because you can no longer sustain yourself on your own land because the water supply has been totally poisoned.
Is that happening in Australia now?
Yes.
They're exploring right now. Our water supply in Sydney, they could start drilling in January next to our water supply. Well, that's pretty scary.
And there's a lady up in Gold Coast who I should be meeting on Monday, and she's putting together a documentary about the fracking agenda in Australia.
Can I just give you a bit of information?
Sure.
I've been distilling water for drinking for several years now, and I also make colloidal silver through electrolysis. Is anybody familiar with the colloidal silver? In about last 6 to 8 weeks, even after distillation, the water cannot produce colloidal silver because there's a green substance that collects on both electrodes. It is a green slime and prevents the process from happening. So there's a chemical in our water already that cannot be distilled out.
Well, I don't know what that chemical is, but I don't know.
I wouldn't have a clue.
Yeah.
But if anybody's interested, just do one. I'll provide you a sample if you like. It is a green slime that collects on the electrodes.
Well, certainly, I mean, there is absolutely no question that, I mean, one of the issues in Ireland is that they've had their water very heavily fluoridated for 40 years.
And petrochemicals also are damaging babies in the womb.
Oh, that's...
And then they're creating actually sterilization.
Yeah. So, listen, I mean, you know the answers to this. I mean, the issue here is that we're all aware of what's occurring here, but because we're all wrapped up in our busy day-to-day agendas, we don't really have the time to focus on it. And that's exactly what these guys rely on. And the other issue is that we're really not the target here. You know, they know that, basically, we would probably never accept the nth degree of this if we were fully aware of it, but we're not really the target because they're working on the basis that most of us are either too old to worry about it or have already left this mortal coil by the time it comes into full force. So the real target is the next generation, which is why I latched onto this, because I think that this, just like the Irishman who in the clip said, we have mortgaged the next generations. Well, it's worse than mortgage the next generations. It's way worse than just the financial millstones that we're putting around these guys' necks if the current paradigm continues. It's what we're doing to the food supply through the introduction of GM, through the removal of all natural food sources, the removal of all natural medicines, the fluoridation of the water, the chemtrails, the fracking, the Wi-Fi. By the way, I showed you that grid here, that electric grid. The ultimate objective and this is already starting in the US, is that every single appliance in your property will be Wi-Fi connected to your smart meter. So that literally, the technocrats have total control over everything. And of course they are able to monitor our behaviours. They know where we are. And Brzezinski, by the way, Zbigniew Brzezinski wrote this in great detail in a book that he published in 1970 called Between Two Ages, The Technotronic Era. And that again is effectively a rewrite of the document published by Marion King Hubbard in 1934 called Technocracy Inc., which is really the basis for everything that's coming through. And then we have, so from Marion King Hubbard, we have Buckminster Fuller, Brzezinski, Morris Strong, Agenda 21. You see how it's all connected. These guys are working on the basis of a population that will be under 500 million. They tell us that, of course, in tablets of stone on the Georgia Guidestones. This is a henge in Elba County in Georgia. In 8 modern languages and 8 ancient languages are the goals and objectives of the global corporation, New World Order. Number 1 on the list is maintain humanity under 500 million in balance with nature. 2 is guide reproduction wisely, improving fitness and diversity. This is the eugenics agenda, and of course eugenics has been the wet dream of the Rockefellers ever since they founded the Eugenics Association in the US in 1910. And number 10 is be not a cancer of the earth, leave room for nature, leave room for nature, get your asses into cities. Fortunately, not everybody agrees with that. So ever since then, this has now been under floodlight and 24-hour CCTV. In the UK, we are the most surveilled nation on the planet. It is outrageous. And they have facial recognition software, so that they can literally trace where anybody is just by pumping in the facial recognition software, can trace you. That's why, for example, the story about the London bombings is a complete myth, because they cannot produce the information from their own technology. We're already seeing the eugenics agenda creep into the discussion in the British media. This is from a couple of years ago. Baroness Warnock, a member of the House of Lords, says dementia sufferers may have a duty to die. Elderly people suffering from dementia should consider ending their lives because they are a burden on their National Health Service and their families. Of course, there was a reaction to this, but that's the way these guys work. Let's test the water, let's see how far we can push the agenda, see how far we can push the envelope, and if there's a reaction, oh, back off, we're not ready for that yet. Leave it a while and then float it forward again. They're on track though. What a lot of people don't realise is the birth rate around the planet is falling by 1% per annum and has done for 20 years. The only reason the population is rising is because the pharmaceutical industry is keeping people alive longer. The quality of life, of course, is a mess. That's why in the UK right now we have a real disaster because of the numbers of care homes in the UK, and of course the corporations have effectively asset stripped them as well. So we've got a real time bomb here in the UK, but what's going to happen is that simply the pharmaceuticals will be withdrawn, and then we'll just have rapid numbers of accelerated deaths. But this is the program. We assume that there are indeed 7 billion people on the earth this year, and I must confess I'm not absolutely convinced that this is the real number. I think it's a fear number. I think the real number is closer to about 5.4 billion. That's based on looking at all the censuses from around the planet. But either way, nonetheless the planet is more than capable of accommodating 7 billion. It's capable of accommodating double that with the appropriate use of resources.
We reached that number this week.
Well, they say, yeah.
Yesterday.
Yeah.
But look at, this is what's happening. Even with, this is from a UN report that the population, the only part of the planet where the population, the birth rate, the only part of the planet where the birth rate is increasing is sub-Saharan Africa. The rest of the planet is falling, and that's a number of reasons. One is economic. In the UK, the recent statistics show that the average age at which a woman is having her first child has gone over 30 for the first time since records began. 2 reasons for that. One is economic, because they just can't afford to have kids, but the other one is the rapid reduction in fertility due to things like aspartame in the drinks. Of course, that's a poison, basically, that's been in the food chain since 1983, thanks to Donald Rumsfeld. But it's more significant than that because it's 40 years of the birth control pill. 40 years of the birth control pill, women taking estrogen all around the developed world, the body doesn't absorb all of the content, is being peed back, going into the water supply. Male fertility is 40% of what it was at the end of the Second World War.
The increased risk of breast cancer 600-fold.
Well, and of course they multiply that even more with the mammograms. Every time a woman has a mammogram, she increases the chances of developing breast cancer, by an astronomical amount. But this is, if I extrapolate this 1% per annum reduction, even assuming it's not going to increase, and the game plan is that it will increase, but even assuming it doesn't increase, then the population will be down under 2 billion in just 125 years. And we won't even notice it. I mean, we won't be here, of course, but I mean, that's what they're working on. We don't even notice what's happening here, so that they can just pursue that agenda and then they will have total control.
FEMA camps? I'll be mentioning with us, FEMA camps.
The FEMA camps, well, we might see the FEMA camps being put to use if the Occupy movement, gets any bigger. So.
Well, the only thing that I can see in the future is a massive war which will upset all the plans and which will, in itself decrease the population. But,
yeah. Well, I think there's a couple of things that can happen here. One is that I think they're going to absolutely accelerate the agenda at the London Olympics, right? And they told us again what the London Olympics is all about. It's the Zion Olympics, the Zionists being the global corporatists. Don't get confused between Zionism and Judaism. The Zionists hide behind the Jewish people.
And behind the Vatican.
Sorry? And behind the Vatican, indeed, as well, maybe. But they hide, the Zionists, what we're seeing, by the way, right now is also a lot of infighting between those who think they're at the top of the tree. But what you've got going on in Israel, which you're not seeing reported, is that there's 400,000 people hitting the streets around the cities of Israel right now. One, because of rampant rise in food prices, but secondly, many of the people in Israel are Russian emigres who were paid to go to Israel, and of course they're suddenly realising that basically there's no work, quality of life is extremely poor, and they're being set up to be used as cannon fodder for the coming conflagration that Israel wants to start with Iran. So what you've got is people protesting against not only the food prices, the agenda of the Israeli government, and they're queuing up at European embassies trying to get visas to get out of Israel. So Israel's got another problem, a potentially rapidly falling population. So that's another reason why they may be desperate to start that war. But the international Zionists this is way beyond just Israel. These are the global corporatists. And one of the things that I postulated back in 2007 when I recorded Fool Me Once is that one of the things I think they're going to stage is the fake alien invasion. Because we can find references going as far back as 1917 to these guys talking about using a fake alien invasion to accelerate their agenda. The earliest reference I can find is John Dewey, who was at the time Secretary of State for Education in the US, and he was involved in the discussions that set up the League of Nations, and he actually said how much easier it would be to establish a global government if there was a perceived threat from outer space. That was 1917. We see it being discussed again in the report from Iron Mountain, which came into the public domain in 1967. We saw it being referenced by Werner von Braun, who in 1974 said that the globalists who he was working for, he acknowledged he was working for in NASA, would ultimately, in fact he said the last card would be the fake alien invasion. And if we look at all the movies that have been released recently, it's mindscaping. It's preparing people, it's getting people to accept this concept of extraterrestrial life. And the fake alien invasion doesn't mean that there isn't any extraterrestrial life, it just means that they can't be relied upon to turn up on cue. And since I recorded that presentation, I've even become more specific. I think it's going to be August 12th. I think it's going to be the closing ceremony. I think they will use this event, and even if it's not the fake alien invasion, it'll be something of enormous magnitude, but they will use that event with the world's attention on it to create the similar sort of reaction that they had after 9/11, i.e. to effectively subjugate the people into accepting their will. Now, there is something else that's occurring here, and I'm really going to swing this on a completely different tack in the last few minutes, because in addition to everything that I talk about in the deep geopolitical arena, for the best part of 2 decades, I've also been researching the knowledge and the wisdom that is held by the indigenous peoples and the ancient peoples of the planet. And one of the things that is truly, truly remarkable is the number of people, number of societies, indigenous societies, and ancient wisdom that points to this particular period in our evolutionary process being very, very significant. I'm not talking about the Mayan calendar and December 21st, although that's maybe a contributory part of it. I'm talking about way more than that. But one of the most significant forecasts of you know, what's unfolding here comes from the Cuero of Peru. And I spent some time with the Cuero last summer, 2010. And I went there because I actually wanted to sort of meet with them personally rather than just sort of read the accounts of the anthropologists. And the reason that I wanted to go there is because I've become very familiar with their prophecy from the work of anthropologists, but I really wanted to get it sort of first-hand. And a number of things contrived to give me that opportunity. But when I went there in June of last year, I had the wonderful luxury of spending basically nearly 4 hours a day for 5 consecutive days with a group of 3 of these people, just me and them. And the way it unfolded was, you know, really truly beyond coincidence. But the point I wanted to address with these people is why it was that they felt that this was such a significant period. And these guys have been lost to the world for 400 years because they've been chased up into the high Andes in the early 16th century by the conquistadors. And the conquistadors returned, but these guys didn't. And so everybody assumed they'd been murdered. But they came out of the high Andes 40 odd years ago in the early 60s, early mid-60s. And they came out and they said that they'd come down after 25 generations. They counted, it was 25 generations since they'd gone into the mountains, and this was part of their wisdom that they held on to. And the reason they came down was because they had to share, had to give advance warning to humanity that we had a tremendous opportunity that it was going to be presented to us, but if we didn't take the opportunity, then we may be facing a time of very real risk. And the key element of this is that we are about to go through an experience which is going to be triggered by a cosmic event, which I'll share with you in a second, which has already started now, which science has proven for us. But this cosmic event is actually, in their belief system, going to trigger what we have been told is junk DNA. Now, this period, by the way, you have some link with the Maori?
Yeah, I am Maori.
Thought you might. I can't remember the exact phrase, but the Maori tradition actually refers to this period in our evolutionary process as the parting of the veil. The parting of the veil, yeah?
Sorry, whereabouts in Peru?
Well, I was up in the high Andes around Cusco.
Close to Cusco. And
Pisac, and in fact I was based in Pisac for the time that I was with these guys. And so when I'm talking with these guys, I said, so will everybody have this opportunity? And they said, oh yeah, everybody will have the opportunity, but not everybody will take it. Because many people are so hooked into their consumerist material reality that they will not let go. They will not let go of their mobile phone, their computer, their wallet. And what these guys are saying is that what is about to occur will literally give us an opportunity to totally reframe the way in which we relate to everything around us. And I think this is already happening. I think that what's actually unfolding in terms of everything we've been discussing earlier this evening is actually part of helping us to wake up to what's occurring here. Because when you think about it, you know, when we go through real personal trauma in our lives, that's when we are truly living. You know, when we're just going through the daily routine of what I call the world of TikTok, you know, where it's a routine, the alarm goes off, we get up, make breakfast, go to the train, go to work, have a beer on the way home, come home, cook dinner, switch the TV on, go to bed. Same routine, day in, day out. We're a very good, abject, economic slave. But then something comes along in our life which rocks our world. You know, whether it's relationship issues, career issues, financial issues, health issues, or it affects somebody very close to us, whatever. But something comes along which knocks us out of that comfortable routine. And when that happens, we actually have an opportunity to actually rethink what's going on in our lives. You know, maybe we want to change some things, maybe we have to change some things, maybe even reluctantly we have to change some things, but we know deep within that something has to change, otherwise, unfortunately, we're not going to get ourselves out of that particular little drama. Now, fortunately, our lives aren't generally one continuous drama. You know, we're given an opportunity to embrace the experience, to reflect on it. We get back into the routine mode, and then just as we start to become comfortable again, the next thing comes along and boom, pulls the rug out from under us. That's living. That's what living in this, you know, this 28,000 days or whatever it is that we have on this mortal coil, you know, that's part of the university, that's part of the learning experience of being here. So consider the possibility that everything that's going on right now around the world, everything that appears to be so horrendously negative against humanity, may actually be giving us a tremendous opportunity to wake the fuck up. You know, and get us out of our complacency and this existence, and actually give us an opportunity to raise our game collectively and move to the next level, whatever that might be. Now, what is this cosmic event that these guys are talking about? Well, it's this. It's the solar storms, the solar activity that started now in October 2011. NASA are so concerned about this, you can find this on YouTube. One of the senior managers of NASA actually issued a video bulletin to all of their employees, encouraging their employees to sit down with their families and to discuss what they would do in the event of all of the electrical grids just collapsing. Phone grids, electricity grids, ATMs will stop working, the computer networks would obviously crash, maybe even the internal combustion engine would not be able to work. We don't know. We've never had an experience like this before. But it's NASA have decided to prepare their employees to consider the most extreme impact, but only materialistically. What the Quero and many other indigenous peoples around the planet are suggesting, in fact, a guy who I know quite well, but I didn't even know he'd written a book on this subject until recently, a guy called Andrew Collins, and he wrote a book called The Cygnus Mysteries, which talks pretty much about the same thing, but from a slightly different tack. But that's also interesting to me, because so many people are starting to see something similar to what I'm talking about here, but coming at it from so many different angles. So either we're all barking up a completely crazy tree, or just maybe, you know, we're actually getting close to something's happening here. I know from the work I do that more and more people, it may not be at the rate we might like to see, but more and more people are starting to realise that things aren't quite right. And that basically we cannot carry on like this, because if we do carry on like this, we are indeed subjecting future generations to lives of absolute abject misery. Can we bring about those changes ourselves? Individually, absolutely not. Collectively, we can certainly make a dent in this. But if we're actually able to bring about changes from a different level of consciousness, then this may be what this is all about. You know, and I think, I'm running a series of workshops around the UK right now called The Shift. The Shift. The full title is The Shift is Hitting the Fan. And the second element of this program is called Shift to the Next Level. Shift to the next level. Because what I certainly perceive is that there are an increasing number of people who are starting to realise that we can actually participate in the creation of our reality. It cannot be explained by reductionist Newtonian science, so of course it gets ridiculed and dismissed. But I think that there is, well, I believe there's evidence to show that the people who are trying to drive this pernicious agenda on humanity know very well that we have this opportunity. And that's why they're trying to close it down. Because this opportunity will be accessed through our right brain rather than the left brain. It's the left brain that keeps us in the secular, empirical, material construct. The right brain is the part of us that gives us the opportunity to connect with the wider realm. And that's the part they're trying to shut down, whereas that's the part that we're trying to, if you like, effectively open up. And what the Quero say is that this is a natural part. It's part of the universal agenda. It's a natural opportunity for giving us an opportunity to take things to a completely new level. But interestingly, the Quero put two riders on this. This cannot happen without our participation. So anybody who says, okay, well all I've got to do is sit back and wait for this to happen, sorry, it doesn't work like that. they say there's two things, and we have to do both. We cannot do one and not the other, we have to do both. The first thing that we have to do is adopt a strategy for bringing about the changes that we would like to see, as though none of this is going to happen. So we have to recognise that we cannot in any way, shape or form leave things to unfold the way they appear to be unfolding. We've actually got to get off our ass and do something and try in our own individual ways, whatever our own particular interest may be. We've got to actually get in amongst it and try and bring about those changes. That's number one. The second thing we have to do is that we have to find some time to sit. I'm not talking about meditate here, but we have to just find some quiet time to get away from the bombardment of the TV and the radio and the iPod and the mobile phone. Create some space where we can actually sit and visualise. These guys actually use the word dream in their translation, but we have to visualise the type of future that we'd like to see. But they also make the observation that we should not have an existential commitment to that visualisation, because that our own visualisation, by definition, is going to be limited to our own bounds of perception. And their observation is that, you know, what is maybe potentially on offer here is something that is currently so far beyond our bounds of perception that, you know, we shouldn't actually do anything to limit that opportunity. But they say we must do both. And they make the observation that if we spend the time in trying to visualise that future, what we will find is that things happen in our daily lives which actually help us to contribute to that agenda. And I wouldn't be telling you that if I hadn't got the personal experience of that actually happening. I mean, since I spent the time with these guys and they sort of, you know, explained everything from their perspective, I mean, I'm not suggesting that these kind of things hadn't happened before, they had, but I was able to put them in context. And so some of the things that have occurred in the past sort of 15 months, just because I do take the time to visualise the type of future that I would like to leave as a legacy for my children and my grandchildren and so on and so forth. And then in terms of my day-to-day activity, incredible things unfold, you know, which they're completely acausal. You know, we might use the words luck or synchronicity, but this goes way beyond that. And now I just say thank you very much. You know, I say thank you very much for everything that happens, and thank you very much for listening to me. Thanks a lot.